Hey folks, Jeff from Corrugated Cavalier here, coming to you with a brand new series on the Fiore Sword and Armor section. So this will be a little bit like my series on the Spear section for Fiore, except for the Sword and Armor section primarily. I'm going to space it out a little bit more though and take it in small chunks. That small chunk today is about the left foot forward guards, or Posta, in the Spear and Armor section, plus one that's just sort of from the Sword and Two Hand section that talks about fighting in armor. So before we do that, let's do a real quick rundown of some of the strategy of fighting in armor. So imagine that I have a breastplate on. I don't have it yet. It's coming, don't worry. And that covers most of my chest with plate, or in my case, it's going to be brigandine. And we have plate coverage on the forearms and maybe upper arms. I will probably not have upper arm coverage, honestly. Then we have the gauntlets, of course. And if I step back a little bit, you can see I've got my plate leg protection. I've only got thighs right now, but I will have shins at some point as well. So we have plate in a lot of parts of the body, and the sword is not going to really do anything to that. So we want to go for areas where there's mail or weak points. Also, of course, I have a helmet on. So those points are the armpits. We can't really put plates there. I would have mail or just this padded under arming garment on. The inside of the gauntlets are just leather. In the period that I'm doing, which is like late 14th century, we would have a mail aventail, so there is mail there. Plate protection for the neck comes later. And the groin area would just be protected by a mail skirt as well. So those are kind of the main weak points. Now, you might not punch your sword straight through the mail, but if you can get your point into some mail, then your weapon at least has something to grab onto and will get some purchase instead of just skidding off. And then you can control your opponent, hopefully, maybe put them on the ground, and then do the deed from there. So let's get into these posta from the sword and armor section. Okay, so the first one that we actually have is from the sword and two hand section, and he does talk about it being an armor. Fiore says he doesn't have a name for this posta. It's just like the fifth master in the section or something like that, I believe. But he says it can be used for extended thrust. So see how I have my hand back by the pommel? That gives me that much more range. Might not seem like much, but it can be. So I get more range on the thrust. But he also says that it's good for fighting in armor, and it shows it like this. So this is a half sorting position, which is when you have one hand somewhere on the blade. The Getty, I believe, shows it with the thumbs pointing in the same direction, like you would most of the time for a spear. And the Pisani Dasi shows it with the thumbs pointing each other, but the hand's still back here. So this is just from the sword and two armor section, and is useful for getting a little bit more range on the thrust, basically. The next posta we're going to talk about is very, very similar, and it's the first one from the sword in armor section. And once again, these are all going to be left foot forward posta. So this is called the serpent when I have my hand up by the cross instead, or the shortened stance. Fiore says that I consider myself better than all the other stances, and it's good for marking thrusts in armor. This seems like a really good, just sort of basic stance. And we're going to get into the difference between this and why it might make a difference in a second, with the help of our lovely assistant Paul, ready for his half sorting lessons. Okay, so that was the shortened stance of the serpent. Now the next one is the raised serpent, and this is the thumbs are pointing toward each other, and we have the sword above our heads. And it says, Fiore says that we start high and end low. And we can make covers against cuts and thrusts, etc. I can definitely see that, especially if you're doing that, or if you're coming offline like that, perhaps. A number of things. So that's the raised serpent, thumbs pointing toward each other. The last one that we're going to talk about today for the left foot forward posta is the archer stance. And this one seems a little funky. The Getty shows it way back here with this, your right hand really, really far extended, and the left hand up here, and the point really close, not really extending past your shoulder much at all. And Fiore says that this is good for coming off line and making a cover and launching thrusts. So we're going to talk about what that will mean once again with Paul in a second. The Pisani Dasi shows it a little bit more natural, I think, but it's still the same idea. It's still very, very close. You don't have much projecting past your body. So let's check these out with Paul. Okay, so the sword in two hands Posta with the hand back by the pommel, we get a little bit more range. On the thrust. Take that, Paul. As you can see, he's very ready for his lessons. That's pretty basic. I don't really want to go into that too much more. Yes, you can do a one-handed thrust. I'm not going to worry about that too much for in armor. So then we're going to talk about the shortened stance, or the serpent. And this, once again, is just kind of for, I think, this basic sword and armor half swording position, covering, making thrusts, whatever it may be. So let's now go to the raised serpent. And Fiore says this starts high and ends low, thrusts down low. So I could definitely see coming in high and going low, or just straight up going in. It also presents a big weak spot here. So I could see really like coming offline and covering and then shooting in as well. So Paul's gonna come try to stab me in the armpit, and I'm gonna go, and then maybe couch the sword and drive it into it, whatever it may be. So last but not least, we have the archer stance. So in the Getty, it shows it way back here once again. And I don't have much shooting in front of me, right? So I don't have much defensive capability here, but I can step off line and cover and then launch my thrust in. And I'm kind of wondering if you could do a sliding thrust. I mean, of course you could, and then couch it afterward once you get your point in the place that you want. So like, I come here, make the cover, sliding thrust, step in. It's also good for if you're getting really, really close, and then you can still get your point in, either with the Pisani or the Getty version, really. The only thing that I'm still wondering, and maybe somebody out there could help me out with this, is with the left foot forward guards, you know, you have the armpit and the eye slit and stuff like that. And it seems like the only way to really cover is this kind of smaller fencing stuff and getting in line, which is fine if that's true, or bringing this around with the pommel or something like that. So I'm wondering how you cover that way to the best effect. Maybe somebody out there knows. I'm just getting started with this, but I will have some partners in future videos, hopefully. Okay, so those are the left foot forward Posta from Fiore's sword and armor section. First, we had actually the one from the sword and two-hand section with the hand back by the pommel, and either thumbs pointing in the same direction or toward each other, depending on the manual. And then we had the shortened stance, or the serpent, which is pretty much the same thing, but the hand up by the crossguard. And then we had the raised serpent with the thumbs pointing at each other and the sword above our heads. Then we had the archer stance, which is way back here. I hope you guys found that interesting. Please click like, subscribe, put any questions or comments, just add to the conversation down below. Please, more than welcome. I'd love to hear what you guys think. You can follow me on Twitter at CorrugatedCav1. I have a pretty decent following there, and I also share a lot of other HEMA account stuff, so come on to Twitter, give me a follow, if you're into Twitter, that is. All right, thank you all so much for coming by the channel. I hope to see you again, and be good to each other, and ciao.